Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1. Ningirsu, the Lord who brings forth the field. In the ancient land between the great rivers, where the Tigris and Euphrates carried life through the dry earth, there came a time when the soil lay vast and capable, yet its abundance had not yet been drawn forth through the hands of those who dwelt upon it. The ground stretched wide beneath the open sky, holding within it the promise of grain and growth, yet without guidance. It remained unformed in its giving. In this early stage, Ningirsu, the powerful god of Lagash, was not found in conquest alone, but in the sustaining of life. He moved across the land with purpose, observing the rivers as they flooded and receded, watching the earth as it hardened and softened, recognizing the patterns that would allow the soil to yield what it held within. The people who lived upon the land saw the cycles of water and earth, yet they did not yet understand how to shape them into abundance. It was Ningirsu who revealed this knowledge, not as a sudden act, but as a promise of teaching, guiding the people to see the land not as something to wander, but as something to work with, to shape, and to tend. He showed them how to draw water from the rivers, not leaving it to flood without direction, but guiding it through channels and canals, allowing it to reach the fields in measured ways. The waters, once wild and uncontrolled, became part of a greater order, flowing where they were needed, sustaining the soil without destroying it. Ningirsu instructed them in the use of tools, in the turning of the earth, in the breaking of the ground so that seeds might be placed within it. He revealed that the soil must be open to receive, that the seed must be buried before it can rise, and that growth requires both action and patience. The people followed his guidance, pressing seeds into the earth, covering them, and waiting as the unseen work began beneath the surface. In time, the fields changed. Where there had once been bare ground, there came green shoots, rising in rows, ordered and intentional, reflecting the care with which they had been planted. The land responded to this attention, giving back what had been placed within it, not in randomness, but in abundance. Grain grew tall, bending beneath its own weight, and the people gathered it, sustaining their lives in ways that had not been possible before. Yet Ningirsu's work was not only the shaping of the land, but in the understanding that such abundance required continued effort and balance. The fields could not be left untended, nor could the waters be allowed to move without guidance, for what had been created could also be undone. He taught that the land must be respected, that it must be worked in accordance with its nature, not forced beyond its limits. The cycles of planting and harvest became part of life, each season carrying its own tasks, each stage necessary for the continuation of the whole. The people came to understand that abundance was not given without participation, that the earth would respond to labor, to care, to attention given over time. Ningirsu remained as the force within the understanding, not always seen but present in the structure of the fields, in the movement of water through the canals, in the grain that rose from the soil. His presence was carried in every act of cultivation, in every seed placed into the ground, in every harvest gathered from the land. Thus, the fields became more than places of growth, but places of relationship where the work of the people and the power of the divine met, bringing forth life through shared effort. In every furrow drawn across the earth, in every plant that rose toward the light, there remained the enduring presence of Ningirsu, the one who brought order to the land and revealed that life answers labor when it is given with understanding and care. Story 2. Tailtiu, the fields won through labor. In the early age, when the land was thick with forest and the fields had not yet been opened to the sun, there came a time when the earth held abundance within it. Yet that abundance remained hidden beneath root and stone. The soil was rich, the rain steady, and the ground capable of sustaining life. Yet without the labor required to draw forth its gifts, it remained untouched, its potential held beneath layers of growth that had not yet been shaped into fields. In this time lived Tailtiu, a figure of deep strength and endurance, foster mother of Lu, whose presence was bound to the land not as a ruler apart from it, but as one who worked within it. She saw that the earth held and understood that life could not rise into fullness without effort, that the land must be cleared, opened, and tended if it was to sustain those who lived upon it. The forest stood thick and unmoving, their roots deep in the soil, yet beneath them lay the ground that could one day bear grain. Tailtiu took up this task, not as a single act, but as a sustained labor, a work that required both strength and time. She began to clear the land, cutting through the dense growth, removing the trees and stones that covered the earth, shaping the ground so that it might receive the light. This work was not swift, for the land resisted in its own way, its roots holding firm, its stones heavy, yet she did not turn away from the labor. Day after day she continued, opening the earth where it had been long closed, preparing it for the planting that would follow. As the forest gave way to open ground, the sun reached the soil more fully, warming it, allowing it to soften and become receptive. The fields began to take form, not yet filled with crops, but ready, shaped through effort into a place where life could be sustained. The people watched this work, seeing not only the change in the land, but the cost of that change. For Tailtiu gave herself fully to the task, her strength poured into the shaping of the earth. She did not work for herself alone, but for those who would come after, those who would plant and harvest, those whose lives would depend upon what had been made possible through the labor. When at last the land had been cleared and the fields prepared, Tailtiu's strength was spent, her body worn by the work she had undertaken. She lay upon the earth she had shaped, and there she passed from life, her work complete, her presence returned to the land she had opened. Yet what she had made did not fade with her passing, for the fields remained ready to be planted, ready to bring forth grain. The people took up the work that followed, placing seeds into the soil she had prepared, tending the land, and gathering the harvest that rose from it. In time, festivals were held in her honor, most notably Lunasa, marking the beginning of the harvest season, a time when the first fruits of the fields were gathered, and the labor that had made them possible was remembered. The fields themselves became a living memory of her work, each harvest a continuation of what she had begun. The people understood that abundance did not rise without effort, that the land, though capable, required participation, required care, required the willingness to give of oneself in order to receive. Thus, Tailtiu remained not only in memory, but in the land itself, in every field that had been cleared, in every crop that had grown, in every act of labor that brought life from the earth. Her story became part of the rhythm of the world, a reminder that what feeds life is not only the soil and the seed, but the work that prepares the ground, the strength that endures, and the understanding that life answers labor when it is given fully and with purpose. Story 3. Shennong, the one who taught the earth to feed humanity. In the early age, when the world had already taken form and the people walked upon the land, there remained a great uncertainty in how life might be sustained. The forests were vast, the rivers steady, and the earth rich. Yet the people lived in constant searching, gathering what they could find without knowledge of how to guide the land into giving more. Hunger moved among them as a quiet presence, not always visible, yet always near. For what was found one day could not always be found the next. In this time came Shennong, the divine farmer, whose being was bound to the earth itself, whose understanding reached into the unseen workings of soil and plant alike. It was said that his body bore the marks of this connection, that he could see within himself the effects of what he consumed, as though the nature of each plant revealed itself through him. It did not stand apart from the land, but entered into it, walking its fields, observing its growth, and seeking to understand how it might sustain those who lived upon it. Shennong did not begin with certainty, but with inquiry, tasting the plants of the earth one by one, learning which nourished and which harmed, gathering knowledge through direct encounter with the living world. This work was not without danger, for many plants carried poison, and it is said that he suffered greatly in this process, his body bearing the burden of what he sought to understand. Yet he continued, driven by the need to bring clarity where there had been uncertainty, to replace chance with knowledge. As he learned, he began to guide the people, teaching them how to cultivate the land, how to plant seeds in ordered rows, how to tend the soil so it would give forth life in a reliable way. He showed them the cycles of growth, the need for water, the importance of timing, revealing that the earth, when understood, could provide not only enough, but abundance. The fields began to change, shaped by human hands, guided by the knowledge he had uncovered, and from them rose crops that could be harvested and stored, sustaining life beyond the moment. As the knowledge of cultivation spread, the people no longer wandered in search of food, but settled, building their lives around the fields that now fed them. The earth became not only a place to walk, but a partner in survival, a force that responded to care and understanding. Shennong's work did not end with planting, for he also revealed the healing properties of plants, showing that the same earth that feeds can also restore. The plants he had tasted became part of a greater understanding, one that would guide the use of herbs and medicines, allowing the people to care for the body as well as sustain it. In time, his presence moved beyond the visible world, yet his knowledge remained, carried in the practices of those who followed. The fields continued to be planted, the cycles of growth and harvest repeated, each season building upon the last. In every seed placed into the soil, in every plant that rose from the earth, there remained the memory of his work, the understanding that life is sustained through both effort and knowledge. Thus, Shennong became not only a figure of the past, but a continuing presence within the act of cultivation itself, a reminder that the earth holds what is needed, but that it must be understood and tended with care. Through him, the world moved from uncertainty into rhythm, from wandering into rooted life, and the fields became places where labor and knowledge joined to bring forth abundance. Story 4. Mama Sara, the spirit who feeds the fields. In the highlands where the mountains hold the sky and the wind carries the breath of the earth across terraced fields, there came a time when the people had learned to plant and harvest, yet still sought to understand the deeper spirit within what sustained them. The soil had been opened, the seed placed with care, and the cycles of growth had begun to reveal themselves. Yet the abundance of the fields was not seen as belonging to the people alone. Within the golden grain, within the maize that rose tall and strong, there was known a presence, a spirit that lived within the crop itself, a force that gave life beyond the visible act of planting. This was Mama Sara, the maize mother, whose being was not separate from the fields, but lived within them, embodied in the corn that fed the people. She was not seen as distant, but as immediate, present in every stalk that grew, in every ear that ripened, in every seed that would be planted again. The land did not give without spirit, and the harvest did not come without presence, for within the maize itself was the life that sustained all who depended upon it. As the maize grew, rising from the soil in steady lines, the people understood that what they tended was not merely plant, but life that required respect and care. Mama Sara was honored in the fields, her presence acknowledged in the planting and in the harvest. As the maize grew, rising from the soil in steady lines, the people understood that what was tended was not merely plant, but life that required respect and care. Mama Sara was honored in the fields, her presence acknowledged in the planting and in the harvest, for the people knew that without her, the maize would not thrive. The crops were not taken without recognition, and the first harvest was treated with reverence, the finest ears set aside, not for consumption, but for honoring the spirit within them. These were kept carefully, sometimes adorned, sometimes placed within the home, not as decoration, but as a living connection to the source of sustenance. The fields became places not only of labor, but of relationship, where the act of planting was accompanied by intention, and the act of harvesting carried meaning beyond survival. The maize itself seemed to reflect this care, growing strong when tended with attention, responding to the rhythm of those who worked alongside it. The people learned that the land did not simply provide, but responded, that what was given to it would return, shaped by the manner in which it was received. As the cycles of planting and harvest continued, Mama Sara remained within every generation of maize, her presence carried forward through each seed saved and replanted. The fields changed within the seasons, yet her essence endured, moving from one harvest to the next, sustaining life through continuity rather than a single act. The people came to see that abundance was not a moment, but a relationship that required care over time, that the fields must be tended with respect, that the seeds must be chosen with intention, and that the harvest must be received with gratitude. The maize, golden and full, stood as both nourishment and symbol, a visible expression of what had been nurtured beneath the surface. Even when the fields were bare, the seeds remained, holding within them the promise of what would come again. Thus, Mama Sara was not only present in the fullness of the harvest, but in the quiet waiting of the seed, in the unseen potential that would rise when the time was right. In every planting, in every tending, and in every gathering of the grain, there remained the presence of Mama Sara, the spirit who feeds the people, whose life moves through the fields, and his enduring presence ensures that the earth continues to give when it is met with care, respect, and understanding. Daily thread for May 8th. The land gives when it is understood. Labor opens what lies beneath. Water and earth answer to care. Fields remember the hands that shape them. What is planted returns in time. Knowledge turns soil into sustenance. Abundance follows devotion to rhythm. Life rises where effort meets the earth.